Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Meiraj Atif and I am a relevant student at Jahan for Islamat campus. So, as you know, I will come with a new CallAnnie with the new topic. So, today's topic is the history of human rights movement. So, let's start. Hello, ChatGPT, can you hear me?
Of course. What do you need help with? Are you looking
Okay,
for a
I have a
definition?
topic, the history of human rights movement. So, I have many
Ah,
questions. So, my first question is, what are human rights? Give me 40
that
points on it.
absolutely. So, human rights are basically the fundamental freedoms and protections that every person is inherently entitled to simply by being human. They're often considered universal, meaning they apply to everyone, no matter who they are, where they live, or their circumstances. They include things like the right to life, freedom of speech, equality, and protection from discrimination. They've evolved over centuries, influenced by different cultures, religions, and political movements. So, human rights are basically the backbone of dignity and justice for all people. Let me know if you want to dive into any of those aspects in more detail. Got it. I'll break it down into 40 points for you. I'll focus on different aspects like origins, key events, philosophical foundations, and global impact. Here we go. Human rights are inherent to all people, regardless of nationality. The concept of human rights is rooted in ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia. Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle discussed justice and natural law. Religious traditions like Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism emphasize human dignity. In the Enlightenment, philosophers like John Locke and Jean Jacques Rousseau shaped the idea of natural rights. The idea of natural law influenced the concept of human equality. The Magna Carta, 1215, is an early step toward protecting rights in England. The English Bill of Rights, 1689, further protected citizens from royal abuse. The American Revolution, late 18th century, emphasized rights like freedom of speech and equality. The French Revolution, 1789, declared the rights of man and of the citizen. The abolitionist movement in the 19th century fought against slavery. Women's suffrage movements advocated women's right to prisoners of war, prompted a push for universal rights. In 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This declaration outlines civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. The UDHR became a moral blueprint influencing. Absolutely. Here we go. 40 short points on why human rights are crucial in society. Protect human dignity, ensure equality for all, safeguard freedom of speech, prevent discrimination, promote justice and fairness, uphold the rule of law, foster peace and stability, protect against tyranny, enable freedom of religion, ensure access to education, guarantee the right to healthcare, support freedom of assembly, encourage political participation, reduce poverty and injustice, ensure safety from torture, protect the environment, promote cultural diversity, promote the rights of minorities, build trust in government, empower marginalized groups, encourage innovation and creativity, provide a foundation for democracy, reduce conflict and violence, promote social cohesion, uphold the right to a fair trial, ensure freedom from arbitrary detention, support economic empowerment, ensure freedom from slavery, promote slavery or forced labor, promote digital rights in the internet age, foster a sense of belonging in society, ensure freedom of movement, promote transparency in governance, ensure the right to food and water, support the right to privacy, promote peace in post conflict societies, encourage international solidarity, foster resilience against oppression, ensure the right to a family life, promote a culture of respect.
So, my next question is to you is that
Of
when did
course,
the
I'm ready.
idea of okay, my question is when did the idea of human rights begin? Give me
Great question. Of course, absolutely. Let's dive into the evolution of human rights ideas across history. Ancient Mesopotamia introduced early codes like the Code of the anii outlining justice. Ancient Egypt emphasized divine kingship, where rulers safeguarded order. Ancient Greece discussed equality before the law with thinkers like Aristotle. In ancient India, texts like the Vedas stressed moral duties and social order. Confucianism in China emphasized harmony, respect, and social roles. The concept of natural law emerged in ancient Rome with thinkers like Cicero. Early Christianity highlighted the sanctity of the human soul. The concept of a divine order gave early moral frameworks for rights. In the Middle Ages, Christian theology introduced concepts of charity and justice. The Magna Carta 1215 was a pivotal moment, limiting royal power and asserting rights. The Renaissance revived ideas about individual worth and dignity. Enlightenment thinkers like Locke argued for natural rights to life, liberty, and property. Rousseau's social contract theory emphasized equality. The English Bill of Rights, 1689, set a precedent for parliamentary supremacy. The American Revolution, 1776, emphasized life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The French Revolution, 1789, proclaimed liberty, equality, and fraternity. Abolitionist movements in the 19th century demanded freedom for enslaved people. Women's rights movements in the 19th century expanded the notion of equality. Labor movements in the 19th century pushed for workers' rights. Post-World War II, the atrocities of the Holocaust spurred a global human rights movement. The United Nations Charter 1945 embedded human dignity in international law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 was adopted as a global standard. Decolonization movements in the mid-20th century demanded self-determination as a right. The Civil Rights Movement in the US, 1950s-60s, fought racial equality. The Women's Rights Movement of the 1960s and 70s redefined gender equality. Indigenous rights movements emphasized land and cultural preservation. LGBTQ+ rights grew as a global human rights issue. The environment emerged as a human rights concern in the late 20th century. The rise of international courts like the ICC strengthened rights enforcement. Global human rights NGOs like Amnesty International raised awareness. The fall of apartheid in South Africa marked a human rights triumph. The collapse of the Soviet Union allowed human rights to be debated in Eastern Europe. Post-Cold War, international human rights treaties proliferated. The Rwandan genocide, 1994, exposed failures in protecting rights. Human rights became integral to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Digital technology sparked new debates on privacy as a human right. Sure, let's lay out 40 points on how human rights protect individuals, each one concise. They safeguard personal dignity, ensure freedom of speech, protect against torture, guarantee a fair trial, ensure freedom from discrimination, protect the right to privacy, ensure access to education, uphold the right to life, protect against arbitrary detention, guarantee freedom of religion, ensure freedom of movement, support freedom of the press, protect children's rights, ensure the right to food and water, promote freedom from forced labor, protect the right to healthcare, ensure freedom from slavery, guarantee the right to a home, protect against gender-based violence, support the right to participate in government, ensure freedom from arbitrary arrest, protect against hate crimes, guarantee the right to a fair wage, ensure freedom from discrimination in work, protect freedom of speech online, ensure the right to marry, safeguard the right to cultural expression, ensure freedom from religious persecution, support the right to a clean environment, ensure freedom of degrading treatment, protect the right to form a family, ensure freedom from arbitrary property seizure, safeguard the right to participate in cultural life, protect against government surveillance abuse, protect against the right to peaceful protest, Guarantee the right to personal autonomy. Protect against statelessness. Protect against freedom from gender discrimination. Promote human dignity in all aspects of life. Of course, I'd be happy to. What kind of direction are you thinking? More about human rights history, other aspects of their impact, or maybe specific case studies or movements? Absolutely. I'll give you 40 concise questions about human rights topics. Here we go. What are human rights? When did the idea of human rights begin? Why are human rights important for individuals? How does the Universal Declaration of Human Rights work? What is the role of the United Nations in human rights? How do human rights protect freedom of speech? What is the right to a fair trial? How do human rights affect gender equality? What is the role of human rights in combating poverty? How do human rights protect children? What is the right to healthcare? How do human rights address discrimination? What is the right to principle of non-refoulement in refugee rights? How do human rights relate to freedom of assembly? What are economic, social, and cultural rights? How do human rights protect against torture? What is the role of regional human rights organizations? How do human rights address discrimination based on race? What is the right to education and why does it matter? How do human rights protect freedom of movement? What is the role of the International Criminal Court in human rights? How do human rights help protect freedom of religion? What is the right to a clean environment as a human right? What is the role of NEOs in human rights? How do human rights relate to prison? What is the role of government in human rights? What is the role of the media in promoting human rights? How do human rights address violence against women? What is the right to asylum for refugees? How do human rights protect workers' rights? What is the impact of human rights on global justice? How do human rights support freedom from discrimination in education? What is the role of art in human rights activism? How do human rights relate to peace building? What is the right to freedom from government surveillance? How do human rights empower marginalized groups? What is the role of education in promoting human rights? How can individuals advocate for human rights in their communities? Of course, I'll break down 40 detailed points on the impact of the American Revolution on rights. The American Revolution introduced the idea that people have inherent rights just by being human. It inspired the Declaration of Independence, asserting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The revolution challenged the divine right of kings, promoting sovereignty of the people. It led to the establishment of a republic, emphasizing representation. The Bill of Rights, first 10 amendments, protected key freedoms like speech and religion. The revolution reinforced the idea of equality under the law, though not fully applied to all. It gave rise to the notion that government should protect individual liberties. Religious freedom flourished as the revolution broke old ties with the Church of England. It spurred discussions about natural rights, influencing global revolutions. The revolution led to the abolition of aristocratic privileges in some states. Property rights became a key part of the new American political philosophy. It inspired other countries, like France, to pursue rights based revolutions. The revolution promoted the idea of inalienable rights, which could not be taken away. It created a sense of national identity tied to individual freedom. The revolution shaped early American democratic ideals. It led to the expansion of voting rights, though initially limited to white men. The idea of popular sovereignty gave people a say in government. It prompted debates about who was included in the people. Slavery was questioned, though it wasn't abolished immediately. The revolution inspired the call for women's rights, though progress was slow. The concept of a social contract influenced American governance. It encouraged a broader discussion about equality beyond property. The revolution fostered a sense of civil responsibility in citizens. It emphasized that governments derive power from the consent of the governed. The revolution made state constitutions a foundation for rights protections. It inspired the idea that rights come from natural law, not just rulers. The revolution gave momentum to abolitionist thought in the northern states. It broadened the idea that rights were not just for aristocrats, but for ordinary people. The revolution set a precedent for peaceful political change. The concept of popular sovereignty spread, empowering citizens. The revolution encouraged the founding of public education, linking rights to knowledge. It gave rise to republican virtues, stressing civic duty. The revolution questioned traditional hierarchies, promoting merit. It sparked debates on citizenship and who deserved rights. The revolution inspired the idea that rights must be protected by law. It encouraged a broader concept of citizenship, linking rights to civic participation. The revolution's ideals spread, influencing Latin American independence movements. It reinforced the concept of self-governance tied to
Okay, great, ChatGPT. So my next question: how did the World War II impact human rights awareness?
That's a really important question. Absolutely. Let's go into detail with 40 long points on how World War II impacted human rights awareness. 1. The atrocities of World War II, especially the Holocaust, exposed the extreme consequences of human rights abuses. The scale of genocide shocked the global conscience, making it impossible to ignore human rights violations. The Nuremberg trials, which prosecuted Nazi war criminals, became a landmark in holding individuals accountable for mass atrocities. These trials established the principle of crimes against humanity as a prosecutable offense. The United Nations was founded in 1945, partly as a direct response to the war's devastation, aiming to promote peace and protect human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948, becoming a foundational document. The UDHR set out a broad range of civil, political, economic, and social rights for all people. After the war, the idea that human rights should be universal gained widespread acceptance. The war demonstrated how unchecked nationalism and authoritarianism could devastate societies. The concept of international intervention emerged as the world recognized atrocities needed global response. The war gave rise to a stronger emphasis on refugee protections, especially after mass displacements. International organizations like UNICEF were created to protect children's rights after the war. Women's roles in the war also expanded, leading to greater awareness of gender equality and human rights. The horrors of the Holocaust galvanized anti-racism movements. The war prompted countries to re-examine colonialism, as many colonies sought independence on human rights grounds. The war's aftermath saw a push for labor rights, as workers demanded better protections. The Nuremberg Principles became a guide for prosecuting future war crimes under international law. The Geneva Conventions were strengthened, expanding protections for civilians and prisoners of war. Global human rights education began to take root, as schools taught about atrocities and rights. The war accelerated decolonization as human rights became a rallying cry for independence movements. The concept of universalism, rights applying to all humans, gained new momentum. The war made it clear that human rights were not just national concerns, but global responsibilities. The Holocaust survivors' testimonies became powerful reminders of why human rights must be defended. The war led to stronger international collaboration on rights, creating shared moral duty. The EDHR was supported by diverse countries, showing the universality of human rights ideals. Post-war trials and tribunals set precedents for humanitarian law. Human rights became a lens through which the world analyzed totalitarian regimes. The war highlighted that human rights were essential to preventing future mass atrocities. The role of the UN Security Council became crucial in addressing threats to peace and human rights. The war prompted a global shift toward viewing poverty and economic.
Okay, great, ChatGPT. So viewer, this was our colony. I hope you like it. See you in another colony with a new topic. So Allah Hafiz, Pakistan Zindabad.